actually extends towards Telstar across the fields there, was that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it
So
goes
that's
into, it goes into. does
Yep,
that
so
loop
it's
right?
Sunset, there we go, right.
Right.
Does the loop right?
That's right.
Sunset.
One of
That's right.
So you want me to include that? I can-
Well,
Well,
that's a
it's part of it.
finish, that's a finished
Okay.
ordinance.
That is a part of it,
Okay,
right?
and that's why we're
Yeah.
reviewing this.
Mhm.
And it ends at some,
At the ends at Sunset, right
It-
below
it
Robbie
loops-
Gunderson's.
It loops,
Right, so-
doesn't it?
No,
It's funny, I didn't
Yeah.
know
just
that.
dead ends,
And
right at Robbie
property
Gunderson's
ends.
property
Because
line.
it's eventually,
Hopefully
plan
gonna
was
connect
gonna
to.
go
right.
Telstar.
So if we connect, if we have it
Okay.
going to the end, to the north road, then it should end at Sunset.
All right, I will do that. And the other missing, I emailed Mary, but I didn't hear an answer. I remembered the conversation that somewhere in the vicinity
Park
of,
Street, Corner Park Street, and Church Street.
okay, Park and Church. I didn't know where the
Congregational
daycare,
church is.
Oh, I was gonna say it's in the church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
based on the
something
congregational
tells
church.
me it's already covered by the Gould shapes, but for the purposes of completeness, if it deserves an, or, a purple circle indicating that it's a daycare center. I'm sorry? There's a daycare center apparently
Oh,
located
daycare, okay.
at Park and Church Street.
Who's
So-
Montessori?
For the
Yeah,
next,
it would be covered under the Gould.
Right.
but for
purple
completeness,
blocks.
it really, if we're putting in daycare centers, we really ought to have it indicated by a purple circle. So I'll extend the pathway to where it ends at Robbie Gunderson's property, and I will add a circle for the daycare center at Park and Church. Does everyone like the labeling? Does that make it easier for people to understand what's
Yep.
happening here?
So on the Telstar, are we doing just the immediate school or the new stuff that's?
I don't currently have the lot split that Telstar bought in digital file format.
I don't know if
could,
they did buy,
they did buy it, but I don't have it included only because I don't have it digitally mapped, but I could manually do it if you think that's important.
but, I mean, it's,
Technically, it's school property.
Is this where all the cross-country trails are and stuff?
yeah, where
When the
off
chat,
of-
when
off of-
Conifer split their lot into thirds,
Right.
Telstar bought the third of the
Oh,
lot
okay.
that closest
off
to the
of,
school, it
Bailey
does.
Road.
And if we want this to pass the straight face test, we should probably have it be as accurate as we.
We decided just before we really formalized the meeting that we would keep this going as a work in progress because we're all gonna keep thinking of places. Another daycare or,
There's a list
Your
of
place
people
was
from
gonna change.
funds that we had already
Yeah.
bought.
Yeah.
so that's your list?
That's the list we originally started with. This was an email I was gonna send to all of you, but I thought I'd spare you. And one of the ones didn't copulate, but.
Okay, well
Yeah,
maybe
we
we can
had,
give it.
And you
all
guys,
of these,
yeah,
and
by all
more.
means, take a look
And
at this
then the
and, feel
reasoning
free to add or
why we
change
ended
it.
up with what we ended up with, whether it makes sense to anyone.
I think everything's kind of cut and dry when it comes to the schools. And it was the pathway we got, but then, like what happens when the Bingham Forest comes together? And what happens when, then what about Valentine Farm? What about the trails across the street at Valentine Farm?
I guess I thought the pathway was off limits anyway, because that is a drug-free zone.
Well, look, we can go, let's go through the.
Oh, it is?
You should have.
Yeah, well, it isn't one and then the other, so,
Oh, okay.
but I had all.
Yeah, my thing, I guess, would be is that the Bingham Forest is town property, but the other's not, it's not for profit. So is Valentine's, I don't know how that's really included.
Well, as I say, I did see Kirk Siegel and I asked him about it. I mean, it's kind of up to them, I think. That is privately owned, so.
Right.
Because that's why in my recreational facilities, I just thought town owns that. Not
Yeah.
like, all of a sudden, someone opens a gym out there, it's a recreational facility.
Don't-
They're
where it
taking it pretty
says-
far, but,
Under the jurisdiction of the town,
right.
how do you read that? Are these facilities all under the jurisdiction? So like the Valentine Farm?
Is not.
It's
is
not. So it would be excluded, but Angevine Pond would be because it's under
Right.
town jurisdiction. And Bingham Forest would be because it's under town jurisdiction. But the Moose Forest is not under town, that's under Mahoosic Pathways type thing.
Right. So we'll have to-
Town is just the
Well,
executive.
so that's, where does the pathway project, how much of that is town versus Mahoosic pathways.
The pathway is all,
I know the name.
Mahoosic pathway, that's separate, that's a whole different.
yeah.
But like the Davis Park stretch, right?
It's
From
all
from
town.
pretty much Sunset to
Because I don't think
North
our
Road, that's
ordinance
considered-
Can include someone's.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, the Mahoosic, I don't know I don't know that that's true, Mary. I don't know that we can call the Mahoosic Triangle town. That's actually land owned by now that I'm glad we're having this
Yeah.
conversation, that's actually not
Because we
owned
can't-
by the town.
But the playground, like when we worked on fixing the playground, I worked with Gus
That's
Sumner.
owned by the town.
And then the benches, the new metal benches, I worked with Scott.
The
to put
property,
those
the
in.
property from where the parking lot for the basketball court at the Dunkin' Donuts, actually, and the snowmobile bridge, and the land behind the old Big Adventure, that's all town. But on the other end, it ends at the boat launch before Route 26. So actually, we probably should not include the
Right.
pathway
Right,
extension,
yes.
because that's not actually,
That's Mahoosic Land Trust.
that's
isn't it?
Mahoosic Land Trust. Now, they could choose to, you know, ask to have us include that, but I think it's up to them to, you know, that's not under our
That's
jurisdiction.
It's not under our jurisdiction.
So
What
to
about,
So
does
then
it
should we
really
add
throw a
the-
wrench?
Bingham Forest?
The Bingham Forest would be, because it's town owned.
Yeah. But it's not town owned yet.
Yeah, Bingham Forest is.
Bingham
Oh, the forest is,
The
yeah.
forest is, the other part is
Well,
not
so
town.
is the town
Yeah.
forest at Mount Will.
And then you might as well throw
It
in
is.
cemeteries.
No one's gonna buy it, take it, you know what I mean?
You know
But
where-
that, yeah, Mount Will, just the parking areas.
Well, the part of the land is town forest,
Right.
Yeah,
not all of it.
the old,
Alright.
the old,
The old Poor Farm,
yeah, the old dump and everything.
Well,
all
if it's
down
recreational use, that
Yeah.
part, then you just take whatever's recreational, I think, of that.
before we could go on, we could spend literally
Days.
weeks talking
Yeah.
about this. So before we completely bog down,
Yeah,
let's go to the strike-through. You should have a strike-through that says draft with 229 on the top in red. I think, Mike, I gave you one. I think that may be the only spare copy.
I only have my, no, I don't have them.
Is there an extra one here?
Yes, okay.
So going through the changes on page, we now have page numbers. Very helpful.
It was very.
Hey, you didn't even think of that one.
Yes, well, I've been doing so well. So on page 1, under purpose and authority, paragraph A, I was asked to bold Title 30, to anytime that there was a reference to title, to bold it. I was asked to bold and underline B, this ordinance does not apply. Under definitions A, when I went to look up chapter 409 to determine whether or not it was MRSA or not, I couldn't quite figure it out, but it was really clear that everything online had public law in front of it, so I just inserted that. Again, this is all we have to remember, this will be reviewed by the town attorney, and I have confidence that Bernstein Sure will be able to correct me on major blips. So, drug-free zone, again, just the MRSA was bolded there. Going to page, those were the only pages to change to page 1. On page 2, we did have discussion about planning board review, and to keep it consistent with our practice with other applications, we added the planning board will only consider applications which have been reviewed and permitted by the state of Maine. There's no point in every, pipe dream, developer in town taking, go ahead.
Pipe dream, I like that.
I just got it.
But the permits that they're reviewing are the town permits, and they would not be reviewed or permitted by the state.
My understanding was that there's a two-step process, that there's a preliminary permit, and then there's a final permit, because the state's doing the firearms background checks and the, sex, we're not going to perform criminal background checks, we're not
Right.
qualified to do that. So my understanding was that all of the, the state would be vetting these applications for, things like criminal records and so forth before it ever got to the town.
be
Now,
like,
maybe-
they would have to
maybe-
have standing before they came.
They give you, the state, you gotta apply for the state first, and then they give you a temporary permit. It's good for 1 year until you come back to them with town approval.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe we wanna specify that they have a temporary permit, because again,
Yeah,
I
they're
just,
actually calling it, where is it?
what are they, yeah,
Provisional license.
provisional
Right.
license, okay,
Without that, we could be spinning our wheels.
absolutely.
They, under the law, you can't even apply to the town until you have that.
Well, I have found,
Provisional.
I have found it very helpful under site plan to have these things really spelled out. You know, you must have your state fire marshal construction permit. You must have your DOT entrance permit. Otherwise, we'd be busy all day
Right.
long with people, with hypotheticals, you know.
Yeah, I know.
So why don't we change, so we're gonna change a planning board to provisional license? Is that,
I'm sorry.
we're gonna change that to provisional license?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
what
understand?
what are we changing?
Yeah,
Instead of the planning board will only consider applications which have been reviewed and permitted, we'll say the planning board will only consider applications which have received a provisional license
Okay.
from the state of Maine. Is that,
A provisional license is their exact word. I don't have it in front of me, but
Must
I,
have,
must, or have been, or must have, all.
I know the law.
I think the key here is the intent, or that we're all agreeing on that.
chapter page 1,
Yes.
is that chapter 1, marijuana legalization act, would title 28?
Would you like to be?
I don't know, it just, you know, if there's something you gotta be
Which
paying
one did you
attention to. If it just, I'm assuming that
Sure.
this is part of
Yeah,
all
okay,
of
yeah,
that title.
Yep.
I don't like my bowls,
Yeah, yeah.
it's the things that
Yeah, under signage,
I'm bringing.
we agreed that because there seems to be some changing standards, again, and I was surprised that there was language that regulated the content of a sign, because my understanding is that's not legal to do, that, you know, the town can regulate size, lighting, location, but we cannot regulate content. So we struck may not use pictorial representation, and we just changed the signage will conform to the sign ordinance of the town of Bethel and the state of Maine.
I got a note on here, section 702, what the heck
I do
does that
too, but
mean?
I ended up striking.
That was where we looked up.
The signage one.
the
Right.
signage.
Signage.
The original
Advertising.
bill
That's
said-
That's where it is
The original
in
bill
the-
said that you could not use
Right,
pictorials.
right, I'm sure it
The original
did,
bill
but
And then they changed
That's
but
it.
they had to have changed it, because
So-
you can't do that.
Yeah.
You-
In the interim, it got changed.
where I found, or where to my thinking, a lot of this seems fluid, rather than citing a specific section, which may change. It just made sense to say that it will conform with the rules of the state of Maine, because
Right.
this is a fluid,
Mhm.
so that was my thinking there. You don't see it because it's deleted because it was a mistake, so there's exterior lighting shall comply with the town ordinance, and then there was a number 4 that we were told was a mistake, so that's gone. Under permit application, there's nothing changed there, because all of that's saying is the person is just presenting evidence to verify that they are who they say they are.
We had a lot of discussion on this about, I bet this is what I have written down, what about storage containers? Could we,
Yeah.
movable, mobile, or transitory location, much discussion about this. I don't know if there's anything that, from a permanent location, no, we should be permitted to operate from a movable, mobile, or transitory location.
I don't know how, I mean, this is always a problem with ordinances. I don't know how you're ever going to write an ordinance that can, like, possibly conceive of every creative, fluid solution that somebody, I mean, if storage containers are really uppermost on your mind, then they should be included, but I think,
that's what all they are.
They are, in reality they are, but in reality they're actually selling houses.
Well, yeah, I realize all that,
Chemicals and stuff and.
but when you say movable, mobile, transitory location, I'm thinking it's got wheels under it.
yeah.
I mean, and you could think of it that way, but
transitory, take care of,
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where we kind of,
right?
Right, yeah,
But once you
kind
turn
of
it, take
ended
it.
up
Once
leaving
you
that
take it.
because,
If you're in a permanent location and you slide it on skis or you drag it off, whatever, it's not a permanent location after that. I don't care if you, how you get it moved, it's not permanent then. So why do you have to change anything there?
okay,
yeah,
My mind.
that's how we kind of
I'm good with that.
ended up there. Under the permit, we had the Maine State Retail something.
And I realized that I was overthinking it and that the only purpose of section 4 is just that the person is providing evidence that proves that they are who they say they are. And that, like, I agree with you, Jim, that we did have conversations about that, but I elected not to include it because
Okay,
all they're doing in this section is saying, okay, I'm applying for the license, this is my evidence that I'm who I say I am.
oh, I think that was the Maine State Retail,
Yeah, provision,
License.
right, but we've already
Permit or
included that on the
something.
planning board review, and we'll get to it too when we get to what you've got to
Yeah.
submit to the selectmen.
So it looks like page 3 is good.
So page 3, there are no changes. Permit requirement, bottom of page 3. And so now we have this, under section A, we get to exactly, this is my original. So we get to the exact same thing that I was trying to do with the planning board. So again, we don't want the select board bogged down with, tire kickers. We only want, serious contenders going before the select board. But now I understand that there's this provisional license. We want the same thing, that the Board of Selectmen will only review applications that have received their provisional license from the state of Maine. So that's a pretty big change there. Do you agree with that, Don?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, the top of page 4.
several for.
So instead of the select board will only consider applications which have been reviewed and permitted by the state of Maine, it will be the Board of Selectmen will only consider applications which have received a provisional license from the state of Maine.
What's the difference between what's the difference between the two?
The planning board, it's the exact same
Well, no,
situation.
from the state.
The provisional license is that they're doing the background check that you,
Right.
your firearms, your this,
Yeah.
that, and the other thing. Then this Board of Selectmen issues the town permit, they then take that to the state in order to get their final permit.
Okay.
It's just
Got it.
words.
And and thinking again, so why do we have two sections here, one for the planning board, one for the select board? The exact same reason that we have it, for example, for restaurants. Somebody comes to the planning board because they're buying a building or building, whatever they're doing, renting, and they're turning something into a restaurant. The planning board is reviewing it for site plan. Separately, the Board of Selectmen issues them their liquor license, their entertainment permit, the state's issuing them their victualers, all those other licenses that go along. So there is a planning board track and there's a select board track.
So do they have to, after they get their state, then they get the selectmen, then they get the planning board, then they go,
Back to the
there's
state.
actually 4 steps, they go back to the state for their state
Permit.
full permit.
Yep.
Yeah, they call it a license, so,
Okay.
not a permit, a license.
Do we want to have the town see that? To verify that they have
That's a great question. Let's
the
think
full
about
stuff from the state, 100%? Because things could change.
So,
Let's think about where to put that in. I don't think that's unreasonable. Do you, Don?
No, it's probably not unreasonable. I mean, it would seem to follow that if there's a process there, that the state would notify you somehow or another.
Let's think about, let me think about where that,
Okay.
Well, it says that, in here, it says that all the permits have to be posted in
Right, but
location, so whenever they get their state ones, they have to post that someplace as well, right?
who's inspecting that? You know, is it our CEO, is it state, if I could go in and get my preliminary, and that's good for a year?
It's good for a year in case the
Okay.
town tells you you can't do it, then you have time to go find another location. When they
Okay.
give you that provisional license, everything's done on their end. It's
Okay.
completely done, and I don't mean to butt in, but you could probably add that under the permit application for operation, must provide a valid Maine provisional license.
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah.
Can we get the-
I said, where are you physically?
Where are you?
Like here, that's what I'm thinking, is just in here somewhere.
But,
Because here you have to present your
yeah,
everything and
Well,
add
I
a
just-
provisional Maine state
Tell them,
license.
I don't think it's, we just tell them that they have to give us a copy, or the town. has to give us a
Yeah,
copy.
they had to,
okay, we can.
they have to
Copy of
have-
it.
I think the town should get a copy of the final, because
Right, that's,
So,
You've got a
Karen,
year.
Where would we put that? Which section?
let me think about where that would go, but I think that's a great point.
Yeah, good definition.
So here, also on page 4, so we were changing A, and then under that A, I changed A, permits will only be issued that for AUMRSs that comply with the 1,000-foot setback from all private and public school state licensed. And then I wrote, I struck out other locations as indicated by the map and just added drug-free zones defined above, meaning defined on page 1, under B. So again, that's only because we could talk about what constitutes any of those forever and a day. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, we need to get through
So
some.
instead of as defined above, can you say section, whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not really above. it's
Section
1B, page 1?
2B. 2B definitions.
to
Sec
be.
2, definitions B,
Page 2,
page 1,
page 1.
section, so on page 1, we have
definition.
we have 2 definitions B, so instead of it just saying defined above, Mary's suggestion is that we change that to 2 definitions B, and I think that's a
You're
good
gonna get
idea.
really lost, so that's fine.
Where are you gonna put copies of all the preliminary or the licenses
But
in
that,
this?
Like, they go to the selectmen.
that just kind of went through my head when I was thinking that, because we're talking, I think we need to, in this, I think we need to define someplace, because we're talking permits,
We should be licenses.
and we need to, there's 2 parts, there's a permit and there's a license.
Yeah,
So we're we need to figure out which pieces are licensed and which pieces are permit.
I think it's safe to say license pertains
Okay,
to
so
the
the
state.
reason that we said permit is for the town, for the purpose of the town, because the state is giving you a license, the town is giving you a permit.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think that
Should be in the
needs to be.
definitions?
Yeah, maybe under the definitions, because once we started talking about it, I'm looking at, okay, permits are valid for a year, which we've got in here
Why don't
twice.
I,
Can
why
you
don't
label
I,
it Bethel permits or something?
well, I think permit.
Permit is defined on the first page as
Yeah.
a document issued by the town.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh,
Town, yeah,
Yeah.
town means town of Bethel. Why don't we, should we wanna add a definition do we wanna add a definition F, state of Maine license? Provisional and permanent? Okay.
Yeah, 2 parts to that,
Okay.
provisional, and do we call it provisional license or
Yeah.
provisional?
Per license,
It's a provisional license.
Yeah, so we
Absolutely.
call it provisional license, and then,
so we'll call
But
it
then
F,
But then there's a
license.
regular license after
Town
that
Bethel
too, so I don't know if you wanted.
town permit.
We just wanna leave it though as it is, permit means issued by the town of Bethel. I think I'd move town up so that permanent and town are right next to each other. I'm back on page 1.
All right.
And then add a new F, license, semicolon, state of Maine, 1, provisional, 2,
Right.
permanent,
Permanent,
final,
yeah.
whatever the word
I
is, I'll
think
look
that
it up.
clears it all up.
Does that clear that all up for everybody?
I can
That was a great
understand that.
question. Okay, provisional, permanent, whatever.
Hope that is right off.
So what's the final license called?
Final license. No.
I'm working for it.
How about permanent?
Permanent.
Really a lot of permanents in here.
Permanent.
Permit. So is it a permanent permit or a permanent?
That word
Permanent
permanent.
No,
license.
because the permanent is separate from the license, I mean.
Permanent and permit.
I mean, if you just, even if somebody had carried through and said license a
I take
Debbie
that back, it's
Green.
conditional license.
Conditional license.
Uh-oh.
Oh, wait, I got two, I have several licenses to put that conditional license.
So it's not.
And your other question is
Conditional.
active license.
There you go.
There.
Active,
There
you
you
said?
Active
So it's
conditional
condition, that
license
makes more sense.
Conditional
Conditional
license,
and
license.
active
and
license.
active.
So the provisional is out,
And
it's
we will
conditional.
Yeah,
define-
provisional's gone.
Or,
All right,
Mike,
that's
must
what
be-
conditional semi-active.
So on page 200 planning board, that's conditional. All right, and then I think these next changes are kind of key. So back on page 4, so so the select board will only consider applications which have received a conditional license from the state of Maine. Under A, permits will only be issued for the AUMRSs that comply with the 1,000-foot setback from all private and public school, state licensed daycare centers, and drug-free zones as defined, section 2, definitions B. Continuing down, under E, you wanted applicant must be a resident, and we've added Oxford County to that. We struck H, you did not want the permits to be transferable. And that, in keeping with that, we further stated that emphatically under I, that town permits are not transferable.
And we need to strike G. Or C.
Oh, thank you, I didn't realize there was a duplicate. Okay, yep, you got it.
The town actually has to notify the state, not the applicant. They have to notify the state. If you approve somebody, you have to notify the state.
Where does it say
Yeah,
this?
within 10 days.
Sarah, what did you just strike? Because permits are valid for 1 year, isn't it twice? Is that what you got?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, let's say the town says, okay, you can do this, then they have 10 days to notify the state after that. Then
Applicant or the state?
They
the
who?
state, the town has to notify the state,
Town.
that this applicant, here's his provisional number, we approved him, and then the state calls you back, would call me back in my case, I guess.
I'll correct the numbering or
Yeah.
lettering, whatever you call it, but add it, under there was like the town,
What?
Whatever you're gonna call that.
whatever.
Well, we'll get rid of
whatever
it.
we
Yeah,
get
do
to,
what the
the
state should
the
tell
town will
them. Yeah,
notify
They shouldn't be doing this if they don't notify.
the state of its action.
The timeline.
The old way is more exciting.
What are you gonna call?
They only have to notify them if once approved, not
Once-
disapproved, right? So it's not action,
Right.
it's only approved.
Yeah.
Oh.
Only approved.
I was just gonna bring that up too.
That's a good question.
That's, you know what, I think the town will notify the state of its action, period, that would include both
Yes.
negative and.
Yes, because I think that they should be
Yeah.
notified if they're
Right.
denied.
They've got a conditional license and they've
Yeah.
been denied, yeah.
So the town will notify the state of its action, and I'll come up, I'll see if there's better wording for that, but I think that is correct there. Permit fees, there were no changes there. Board of Selectmen may refuse, review, blah, blah. Then suspending or revoking, and here I'm still a little bogged down, again, we do have town council at some point, but it seemed to me that any decision by a board, whether it be the planning board or the select board, so going to page 5, I left it vague, but I did add a section C, appeals. There has to be a mechanism for people to appeal a decision,
Right.
whatever that mechanism is,
True.
you can't just,
Right.
this
Sure,
is not,
because
the
it is a board,
this is not
and
the
a board is making a
Inquisition, you know,
decision
it's.
that way.
We appeal to you right now.
Yeah, you know, so whatever and I started reading the statute to try to figure out what the process is, but for right now, let's just call it appeals and hope, you know, that the town
So
attorney.
somebody that
would approve for a liquor license.
or or entertainment.
Right.
What is the,
There's a process to appeal to the state. Absolutely.
Cause that's what I wrote down from our last meeting, the means of appeal would be aligned to alcohol.
Yeah, so there has to be a method of appeal. I mean, unless this is some weird thing that I've never seen before, there's always a method for appeal
So you're
and
saying to the state or to the town?
to the state. Or to
Well,
the town.
well,
I don't know.
State.
What about
As I
the
say,
appeals?
I left it, if you look
The
on page
liquor
5, I
fee.
left it undefined because I don't know. I'm
But it
just saying, but
wouldn't-
it has to be.
I don't understand why it would go to the state if it's the town that's denying them.
As I say, I didn't specify, I just
Right.
left it that
No,
it needs to be an
it's-
answered
when-
question.
If we've had, with the liquor,
But
if there's,
typically-
if there's something, somebody gets
You
denied
give
their
it the state.
license, the state's gonna say, we don't know what their stuff is, they're gonna appeal, they have to come back to the town to appeal
Because
it.
this is our
That's why
ordinance
we
they're
have,
appealing.
that's why we have an
The Board of
appeals
Appeals
board.
Board.
Yeah, because they're
As I say,
appealing
I
ours.
left it undefined, I just
That's
knew
good,
that there
that's
had, I knew
Yeah.
there had to be something there because this is not a
how about a
dictatorship.
building
They-
permit,
they-
when somebody gets shut down for a building permit?
Even
they're
if
They
appealed.
come to the
Board of
the
Appeals.
Board of Appeals, that's
So
what we're
So
there
is that
for.
what we do?
Yeah.
Go to the Board of Appeals?
As they say, I would rather get legal, I'm over my head here.
Yeah,
I just know, I know there needs to be a mechanism for it, which is why I put it in
Okay.
there, but I don't wanna pretend to,
Is that the same as liquor?
I don't know that you're gonna have to
Yeah,
really
piece of liquor license.
totally
Board of
spell
Appeals.
it out.
Don't worry about it,
Just
for $285 an hour, we can get an answer.
So why don't we put in that,
Because if they go to the
They
Board
go
of
to the
Appeals,
Board of
they'll fail
Appeals.
there. and
well,
it's affected
what
the
would
court.
happen, Don, if, I've never seen this, but let's say the liquor license at the Sudbury Inn is denied, what would the mechanism be for, do we know, or should we not bog down on this?
But we don't have an ordinance for that.
I honestly don't know, my sense of it would be they would probably come to the town first and say, why did you deny this?
yeah,
I want to appeal it. And whether it's appealed here or appealed there, I really
I'm
don't.
trying to remember what was
I
the
think
last
this is-
thing.
I think this is a really important question, because it should be in every, it should be in each of these ordinances, and it should be
Well,
consistent,
they
so.
have, when we've done other appeals, there's a time frame
Right,
that they have to do, and I'm trying to remember what the last thing we did. We had an
You get
appeal.
30 days from, like, the site plan is denied,
Just
30
align
days.
to the liquor
Yeah.
license.
Tomorrow.
as I say, I don't know anything about
I
liquor
think
The
licenses,
liquor
so.
license isn't in here.
No, it's not.
It's just, that's a
Because it's
state,
state.
that's what I mean, this is our thing, they would have to appeal us, in my.
As I say, I would like to get outside help on, I just included it
Yeah,
to
that's
say,
fine.
hey,
Yeah.
we need to be thinking about how someone would do this, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think we can
wanna.
argue this till the cows come home,
Yeah,
and the best thing to do
It
is.
is ask the attorney, but anyway, I think, can we agree that it's worth, there
Yeah.
needs to
It
be.
has to be there, and it would go to
And we
the,
want it to be, we
the
want it
Board
to
of
make
Appeals.
sense, so.
Okay.
and the time frame, because I know there's a limited,
Yeah,
and I can't remember what that is.
I think it's different,
It's in
and I think
there.
it varies by, as I say, liquor licenses aren't in there, because that's not those aren't town. And that ends the strike through, so there's still work to be done. Further amendments to be made in a very constructive and limited way.
Sarah, did you get the email with the, medical?
Yes, and I have copies of it too.
So we'll have a second review.
So we'll have there will be a second review of this. My, thinking here is the next meeting of this board is March. March 6th. I don't think we'll have an answer on appeals by then, but I think it's worth getting that answer right, because.
Oh, it was a sign that.
Yeah, that can take,
Yeah, because as I say,
Just gotta
there
add it in
needs to
them all.
be, in my humble opinion, there needs to be an appeal mechanism in each and every one of these, there are 5 ordinances altogether, Pat, yeah. So, each one of these 5 ordinances needs to have an appeal process, so we'll be working on that as a track while we're going through our.
I think that'll probably just be a blanket thing too, and I don't know why you can't just say, in reference to the appeals rules of the town or something like that.
They're not consistent because it depends on what you're appealing.
Oh, okay.
And
But they have to be ruling for each category, you know?
I don't know, I think you could make it, I mean, I don't know. As I say, I don't wanna pretend to know how to handle it, but I just know that we have to handle it. So does,
So on, as far as like entertainment,
right,
any licensee who has requested a permit has been denied or whose permit has been revoked or suspended may, within 30 days of denial, suspension, or revocation, appeal the decision to the Town of Bethel Board of Appeals. Appeals Board may grant or reinstate the permit if it finds that the permitted activity would not constitute a detriment to the public health, safety, welfare defined in 29.3. Denial, revocation, or suspension, blah, blah, blah.
So it's probably standard, or not necessarily standard, but it's kind of cut and dry.
I would think so,
Yeah, it
yeah.
Sounds close.
I just don't know
Right, I
which,
think-
who you do, you know, who is the overseeing authority, that's all.
Why would it be any different than any of the other?
Well, because it states in California.
Right.
It's I think Don's right, we have to have our legal.
I'll talk with Retta
We
Powers.
can write all the words we want to and write it in
Yeah.
there, and it'll be,
I'll get permission from the town
Wrong, so
manager to contact
no sense
the,
beating the dead
yeah,
horse.
contact the town attorney on this, because I think we want to get it right, I think we want it to be correct. and-
So should we start moving on to the
Yeah,
next one?
well, that's my,
Here's, we're here
I
for
mean, because a lot of that's all gonna be in
Yeah.
duplicates anyway.
Everybody have number 2? I had my numbered, which is adult use marijuana cultivation facility ordinance.
I believe it was
I think we all
Jim
numbered
Bennett that came up with the numbering system.
That was tardy for that.
So before Jim says it, I'm gonna
That's the
say.
bold. We already know that I just didn't have time to.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
To do it. So.
Can we just blanket that in this whole thing
Yes.
and just say all?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And actually, I think, who said that I think it was Mike that said that we tackled the toughest ordinance first, and we
Yeah.
could really just copy and paste most of the same. So looking at my strike through.
That's why we went there.
So, I would suggest in the purposes of consistency that whether it's pertinent or not, we go ahead and add definition F, which is license, which means state of Maine license.
How come we have places in here?
conditional and active.
Yes. Yep. Provisional and permanent, weren't those the words?
Conditional.
Condition.
What was the second one though, active?
Active
Conditional and
license.
active.
Yep.
Let me write that down.
Is this an old one or something?
So new or existing building requirements.
Three, maybe three.
At the top, these pages aren't numbered yet, so page 2, so again, it would be the same, so planning board review, we would add the planning board will only consider applications which have a conditional license from the state of Maine.
Oh, it's under the permit.
Would make the same changes to signage, that signage will conform to the sign ordinance of the town of Bethel, of the state of Maine.
You don't have one?
We need to put in,
Well, for what you gonna give it?
we need to put in fees, not a dollar amount.
Oh, these aren't in this one?
These aren't in the first one either.
I think they are.
Yeah,
said it'd be on the fee schedule.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it
for the
refers to
amount,
fees.
but just,
Yes, it does. On page 4 of the previous ordinance, adult use marijuana retail store, on page 4, permit fees, initial and renewal fees, page 4.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Did they?
And that, we need to make sure that that is included in all,
Yeah.
and it's also in this ordinance, Jim, on what would be page 4.
Yeah.
So, again, under suspension and, we need to add that appeals again.
Everything in there just says any discrepancies from any of the stuff except from this or says you go to the appeals court. But there's absolutely nothing in there saying anything about.
As I say, I'm gonna, yeah, so that's easy, except that, again, you know, again, the $64,000 question, I think, on all of these is, you know, drug-free zone, recreational, you know, do you want a list, do you want, you know, do you want a map, do you want a list, do you want to spell it out, do you want to leave it free form? You know, I don't know.
And you get 4 or 5 to work through with that, so it's
Yeah,
saving
yeah,
time.
it's lots of time. And we
I
can
mean,
back-
somewhat.
So we're gonna go through this one line by line, or we can?
I think we just did. We can
My
do it.
question, just ventilation, where it says
Oh,
that
okay.
any indoor operation of, we shall meet the minimum state requirements for ventilation. Can we,
We can change that, we can add that. I had a question too, I marked
Okay.
that. After being at
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have glossed over
Mr.
that.
Everett's and being very impressed with that, is that a state minimum or is that a max? Where would yours lie in that?
I would say that's at least a state minimum,
Okay.
okay, probably, I mean, I think anybody reputable that's gonna open an indoor marijuana facility, I would think you'd wanna vent it so your neighbors don't smell it if you're being responsible, but, you know,
Not
you
every
might wanna
night,
put
but-
something in there that it needs to be, I don't know, adequately ventilated so you can
That's
smell it,
assistant
you know?
units is.
What,
can you
Wow,
grow
whoa,
it?
whoa, remember, these things are going to the planning board.
Right,
So there's an odor standard in the performance standard of site plan that says that it cannot, whatever project is, cannot emit odors, perceptible odors beyond the property
on the
line.
property lines, there you go.
but how do the others get away with it?
Well, only one facility has, most of the grow facilities in the town of Bethel are currently home occupations. They did not go
West
to the
Bethel
planning board.
is not a home occupation. West Bethel reeks.
I don't know, what facility is this?
The one in the mill.
The old mill, the white part of the mill?
Yeah,
On the riverside?
Well, they're actually, yeah, on the riverside,
Now,
but they're
that's a
actually in
very
the building. They're in the
interesting-
brick building.
That is a
Well,
very
actually, they moved
interesting
in.
question. So typically uses, I mean, that has not.
So you can
been-
smell that facility there? Can you?
Smell the aroma, well, it may be coming from
That-
somebody else,
You just
but
got nailed by the electrical inspection too hard. Maybe replace all those lights, they're not UL listed.
That has not been reviewed by the planning board. It was an existing structure. It's an existing structure. There are several in town.
with a new,
He did not come to the planning board for approval. He did not construct anything. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the.
from what I've heard, there's a
I
lot
don't
of
know.
stuff
Yeah.
that was constructed
I
inside.
believe
medical.
it is. I
It's
believe
a
it
change
is,
of
isn't
use
it?
building.
Mike?
It went from.
That's-
I haven't been in it, I don't.
but that's not.
I haven't been in it, I just.
No, yeah, that's
That's
not what we're not here
so-
for.
No,
so-
that's okay. But it, no, let me go back to why I brought that up. And it pertains, where does
The ventilation,
this stuff
the odors.
fit into,
Right.
We just referenced back on B, we referenced back to like sign ordinance of the town of Bethel. So for ventilation, should we reference back to some other ordinance about smell, just so it's.
It'd be good to see what the state standard is. Do you have it?
June.
They're
I
working
talked
on exactly what their standard's gonna be, so I think you leave it as state standard, and then,
Add
like
on-
Sarah
add
said,
on
you add on there that it's per town regulations, that it,
Yeah,
the
add
smell couldn't
on
exceed the property line or something.
Yeah, I think we should
Because,
reference.
yeah, I have talked
Is
to
it
them,
done
it's
properly like
quite
this?
complicated.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I'd
wanna-
like
I
to
wanna
know what,
just put in-
I want to know what your
That's why
standard
we
is.
put
I
that.
wanted to
like
put
We
that in,
enforce that.
Say Mike
as long as
Everett.
it's like Mike's.
One on.
That's what, you know, we'd like to know
Has
whatever
to
you
measure up to
did,
Mike.
if we could put that in.
Right. Well, see, there's a couple, like Gabe's new building, he doesn't bring in any fresh air, he uses CO2. So he has to filter inside the building. Me, I bring in fresh air and I exit with bad air.
Right,
I do that with charcoal filters,
Okay.
carbon charcoal
so
filters.
he's done a different system, but the
He's-
results are the same,
The
that there's
results
no,
are the same.
nothing
There's
emanates
two
from the other.
ways to do it, correct.
So if you didn't have the charcoal filters and it just blew out, we would smell that.
Oh, yeah, you'd smell it for long with it.
So it would be good to get
Well,
a
when
better
I,
description, but we can come back to that.
but can,
because-
for the time being, can we just, under ventilation, add any indoor operation of a AUMCF shall meet the minimum state requirements for ventilation and the odor standards
Yeah,
of chapter 140, whatever that section is.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So Mike brought up a good
Understand
point.
Okay.
Do we need
Because
to
it's gonna be reviewed by.
have anything in this stuff in regards to things like lighting and stuff
Well,
to
if it's-
reference back to
Well, I
those
mean,
I mean, that should all be under.
it should all be in the
planning board.
planning board review anyway, so you shouldn't have to call it out separately, really,
Okay.
but
Yeah, but we got hung up on that before we were, so.
See that, like you mentioned, the lighting, that falls under the state electrical inspectors, because under, there's gonna be a lot of people are gonna be unhappy when they start inspecting this stuff, because the state electrical office considers it commercial, so you have to have a state electrical
oh
permit.
yeah, that's totally outside of. we
Right,
don't have
well, you
any-
guys,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, they're gonna they
But-
take care of all
So
that.
I think it's interesting that under security, I mean, there's your kind of safety net there, though, that exterior lighting would be compliance with town ordinance, because Bethel does have lighting standards. We do specify the maximum candle,
Candle power.
thank you, at the property line. So for people, I know Mary has expressed concern, unfortunately, that location that concerns you is not under town jurisdiction, but, you know, should somebody be concerned that somebody's gonna erect, 40-foot security lights, around their barbed wire fence, that would prohibit it from happening. But
That would also have to go to site plan.
that's what you guys
Would we-
absolutely.
Are we good with this page? Permit application is next, and then we have, I think that's,
So again, I'm gonna take the liberty on page 4, under permit requirements, I'm gonna make the same change that I made to the previous ordinance, which is not, and I'm not sure whether it came up clearly in your strike, so I'll state clearly what I'm doing. So yes, we agree that this permit shall require review and approval by the town of selectmen, but the town permit shall be contingent upon the applicant containing, we're gonna change that the board, to match the previous one. The
Right.
Board of Selectmen will only consider applications where
Yeah.
they received their provisional license from the state of Maine.
Conditional.
Conditional, thank you. So those will be consistent throughout, because again, we don't want the select board bogged down with,
Right.
And Sarah,
Why don't you put
under
that
F,
right in?
applicant must be a resident of Oxford County, has to be added under F.
yes, I'm gonna make all the striking changes that I made through 1 the same to this, to make it, to make these consistent throughout is the goal, but point them out if I missed it.
Are we on the next page? The suspension and revocation?
And again, we're gonna have to add, we've already discussed this, so we're gonna add a section C there, appeals, whatever that will be there as well.
The the liquor stuff in town code all goes under entertainment. And then under entertainment is what's the appeal for.
This is the one.
They go to the appeal for.
But we'll,
But, I mean, we can verify
Yeah.
that, but
Okay.
that's what it does say in there, that liquor is under entertainment.
okay. So that's comparatively easy.
We're all good with everything else?
Yeah, pretty good. As I say, you guys have made the hard decisions and we're just applying those.
Well,
And it's pretty much the same with C, facility,
The third ordinance.
yeah.
We want to use,
are we all ready to tackle the third ordinance?
That's
You guys are,
adult.
you guys
I'm
wrong.
not messing around.
Pretty much.
roll.
A lot of it is just,
It's mostly,
Well, that's what
Yeah.
we're, do you know,
That's what we
it's-
did.
to my knowledge, that Bethel is the only town that split them into categories, so that people wouldn't have to make a choice all or nothing.
Yep.
I've not found any other ordinance like that, like ours. I'm proud of us.
okay.
And we felt it was fair to the voters to do that.
Are you here for ordinance review?
No, water district meeting,
At what time?
7?
Okay.
Who?
He's prompt.
We'll be leaving on time tonight.
No way.
Okay, so we wanna tackle number 3
Number
here?
three.
Yeah.
Let's
So
go for it.
again, bolding, definitions. I don't see, this is a manufacturing, okay.
So that still has some separation.
Yeah, so the same changes to ventilation.
And signage. What's the difference between,
I'm going to, yeah, I don't know,
the difference of what?
manufacturing and cultivation.
Manufacturing is more like when you're gonna turn it into cookies.
Ooh. Just right there.
Extracting the stuff.
Okay.
That's different than growing it,
Okay.
apparently.
so is there any,
Radiation and stuff.
in the manufacturing, there's nothing else to consider when they're extracting it?
Yes.
There is actually, the one, where did this come up? What were we thinking about? Oh, I know what it was, the facility on Route 2 that we were just talking about, didn't they come to the planning board for a determination of applicability? Because he was considering, that, yes, it did, so this is public record. He came to the planning board for a determination of applicability regarding a manufacturing facility on his Route 2 location, and the planning board said, oh, yeah, that would definitely constitute change of use, because you could potentially use flammable materials and other materials that would be quite different from just growing.
Right.
Now, what facility was that? Is that the one that, where the stones all were?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
He did, and yes, and this is
That's
public
not, is
record.
that the one you were talking about?
No,
No.
no.
I didn't-
No,
No,
we're
Yeah.
crosses
Right,
at the Kendall Mill,
the cross, across from cross.
Yeah.
across from Cross at,
Aren't they both named Ben?
On Barker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
On Barker.
at the one on the corner of Barker
Yeah.
Road.
Yeah.
Was, so we had, Bethel Furniture,
it's the old Tibbetson.
Tibbetts Mill.
Where
The
they're
white
doing
one.
the rock slicing?
No,
That's
Tibbetts
across
was
the
the one
street.
on
Tibbetts.
the riverside, across the
By the
street from
ferry,
Cross
by the boat launch
Excavation.
in West Bethel.
Okay, and
This,
it started out in that little brick building outside the gate.
Well, it doesn't matter.
And
It's not
now
part of the-
it's
It's not part of the.
everything
this
in
isn't,
there,
this actually,
because no,
so,
it's part
this
of
is the
the,
only,
and that's,
But I'm just wondering if there's something else we should be considering.
there, I'm just wondering how we could, so what the planning board determined in the case, so this was the, and as I say, he's been to the planning board, it's all a matter of public record, I'm not telling any stories out of school. Ben Cotro came to the planning board to get a determination of applicability about leasing space to or using some portion of the stone mill mason building for manufacturing, and the planning board determined that it would constitute a change of use because there might be the storage of hazardous or flammable materials that required review by both the state fire marshal and the town of Bethel fire chief wanted a crack at it, and that it did in fact have to go to the planning board for review. So my concern here would be not just ventilation, but, you know, fire marshal permits, you know, I mean, you know, I don't know what the wording is, but yes, to me, they are different in that regard, Mary. There is a
Right, so
slight.
that's, I guess that's what I was getting at,
Yeah.
like we added ventilation to
But this-
number.
But nothing else is going to require state fire marshal or,
So is
I don't
there
know.
anything about,
Well,
except that it has to meet site plan again, which.
Yeah, right.
Get the
Yeah, it's
site
gonna be-
plan.
It's gonna go in front of the planning board.
You look at, take the stone place.
Yep.
When it was Bethel furniture, it was all flammable stuff in there. The
No.
sawdust,
Oh, sawdust, yeah.
the stain,
He didn't use state.
Or paints.
and the original one, but
Yeah.
the sawdust did, because we have many.
No, the sawdust may have,
So,
but it was
you
really
would-
clear, the DEP was really clear in their air emissions license that they were not using flammable solvents there, because they had a DEP site location permit for that location, which makes it different than most locations in town.
Right, and they don't give those away.
No, they do not give those away. So it had been pretty closely vetted for that. And then, but because it was stated in writing on the DEP site location permit, hey, have not been flammable, you know, substances here. The planning board determined, whoa, now if you're gonna start manufacturing this stuff, and you might be using chemical extraction, it is a change of use, because you are not permitted. Yes,
Okay, so on the manufacturing
yeah,
facility, they've got it in here to where if you want, okay, so a manufacturing facility looks like it also includes if they wanna make edibles and
Right.
something that doesn't contain a hazardous gas or substance. So what they got it in here is that it can't have that, okay? And then unless they've got it in, unless the products manufacturing facility licensee requests and obtain from the department written approval to engage in marijuana extraction using a solvent or other chemical processes that uses their inherent dangerous substance.
I mean, that's the concern.
So.
We're not making a
Would
judgment on the
reference-
product, we're just saying is it gonna be like unsafe?
Ventilation F meeting
Yeah.
our requirements of our ordinance of the state and local fire.
Right.
So Mary, your question again was what?
when we went from facility, we added ventilation because there was concerns when we went from
Right.
the original to, so then it's when we come to manufacturing.
Right.
Are there other areas, like, similar to ventilation, that we should be calling out?
Yeah, and
referencing?
it's flammable,
And
it's
and-
flammable.
What I'm saying here is you can get a manufacturing license. If you apply for one, it comes with, you can't use the gases, the explosive
Oh, really?
stuff. You have to apply for a separate license for that. It's not a separate license, but it's like an adder to the license. And, let me see here.
Wouldn't you want the town to know about that?
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah, you'd have to.
Yeah, but it has to be, you have to have a certification from an industrial hygienist or professional engineer following the review of the storage facilities, preparation, electrical, gas, monitoring, fire suppression, electrical,
Awesome.
exhaust systems. I mean, this is they're gonna,
Well, the planning board really acted correctly in the
and
case.
in here also, if you're using that type of equipment that you're making shatter or something out of when you're running butane or something, even the equipment you're actually using, that has to be certified, whatever it is, ASTM, I don't know, whatever the certificate, ISO certified,
Yeah,
made, and then it actually has to be inspected and approved by a Maine state engineer. So, however you wanna word it
Yeah.
in there, you can get the license, but you may wanna put in there, if you're gonna use inherently hazardous gases, you will need, what I'm doing
whatever. For right now is just writing an F flammables. And
yeah, so, if you want, that's on page 39, then you can read
What is
through
that
it.
thing
and-
referencing again? What is it?
That's on the manufacturing facilities.
This is,
In
page
regards to the
39 of
gas.
this? Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of
you
seems to
were-
me that this definition that we have is kind of lacking in a way then.
Okay.
Yeah, because
I mean,
you were
it's the
actually
state,
doing,
state's definition, right?
Can we refer,
Yeah.
just refer to that?
Mary, you were saying a manufacturing or a,
I didn't know what other areas we needed to call out when it
Yeah.
came to manufacturing. Like when it was the growing, we called out ventilation
there we
because we
go, okay.
knew that was listed. So
Okay,
then when we
all right,
moved on to
all
this
right.
next one
Now
for
I-
manufacturing,
all
I
right.
just wanted to be clear if there was
Nope,
anything
now
like
I-
that.
it was,
Sherry,
it
Jewel,
was,
this is in.
Sure.
So,
409,
when you said,
chapter
wouldn't
409.
the town want to know about that? Could they know about it through the license that the person
Is it covered
obtained
under
from the
409?
state? Wouldn't it be covered in that if they had
It's under
to
400, yes. Yep.
get
I
like
don't know.
special clarity on that?
We're gonna have to-
It's a great question. Now, as I say,
Somehow
I'm
you'll-
just writing
you'll
flammables as a
figure it out.
question, you
Yeah.
know. But I mean, I certainly know,
yes, a cultivation is just
growing.
growing, where a manufacturing
Yes.
is actually, is putting
Jerry,
components
Pat?
together.
Pat?
Under definitions, where it says means a facility license under chapter 409, that's where that's coming from, is chapter 409 that he just read.
Okay, so, so the adult use manufacturing, we're on definitions A, under the third ordinance, adult use marijuana manufacturing means a facility licensed to blend, infuse, compound, or otherwise prepare marijuana, including but not limited to marijuana extraction or preparation by means of chemical synthesis.
Right.
So that's, well, you know, what
That's what
what
you're
does that
talking
mean? I don't know, you know?
And it's under chapter 409,
Okay.
right there.
And so maybe that's an emboldened, means a facility license under chapter 409.
And
Well, okay, so the definition is fine, but I think you guys are on the right track, that under concerns, under newer existing building requirements, to add that F flammables, whatever that turns out to be, just like, heads up, this is a little different than just,
grow, yeah.
like, it's not like growing tomatoes.
Well, Mike, what would be used in that? I think
They
mentioned
can use butane, they can use propane, they can use ethanol.
Okay, so maybe we add
they can-
flammables such as,
Okay,
And yeah, I think.
CO2.
right, That has to have ventilation stuff too.
okay.
So is any of that, if you're doing cultivating, if you're doing growing, is there anything, it's not just throw the seeds in there and stand back, or do they put pesticides, or do they put,
In order to
Stuff. like
use,
farmers?
you can use pesticides, but in order to use them, you have to have a pesticides license from the
Right.
Department of Agriculture. And their pesticides are pretty limited, because people are smoking the product, they're eating it. So the pesticides that they use are,
Well, and I was using pesticides as a generic, but I mean, is there anything else?
There's nothing
that they
flammable.
could use to help the growing?
I mean, basically it's fertilizer, water, dirt. I mean, if you're doing hydro, then you're running a hydroponic system, and that's just all standard nutrients in the water. The big thing with the state is the pesticides, because they've got rules. If you are using them, they gotta be in a locked metal cabinet. It's, you gotta go take the test, you gotta train all your employees. It's pretty regulated.
Correctly so, yeah.
And should there be just a reference to that in the cultivation section, or is that?
Well, I think it says you gotta be compliant with the state law, so, I mean, they're not gonna give you the permit to do it if you don't give them a pesticides license.
Under site
Right up front, they're
plan,
not gonna.
under the site plan, like when the planning board does a site plan review, one of the standard of conditions, the two standard conditions, the first one is, this is the, what you just presented is the only thing that you're approved for, you're gonna do what you said you were gonna do. And two, you're gonna get all the other permits that are required, and we don't enumerate for each project what they are.
But if I was to go and put up a building and start growing stuff inside, to grow stuff and cultivate it and process it after, because that's what you're doing, is there anything in the flammable direction that
There's
I
nothing
would?
flammable, on the cultivation end, no.
Okay.
So,
Nothing.
are we good with ventilation and flammables for now?
Yeah, where did we put that under?
Under, on what would be page 2,
Wait a minute.
so the third ordinance, adult use manufacturing, page 1, page 2, those would both be changes on page 2 under the third section, newer existing buildings.
Now, there's only one other thing there just to consider, I don't know how much you wanna put in there, because you'd have to be compliant with the state anyways. Under the products manufacturing license, like I said, somebody can get that license and not process into the oils and the shatters with the hazardous stuff, but they would be doing a kitchen. In order to do a kitchen, other than having the manufacturing license, you also have to have a commercial kitchen license on top of that.
Do we have to,
But it's state law, so.
Yeah, so again.
Again, compliant
yeah.
with the state, I
I
guess.
see that as being comparable to the planning board, you know, again, the planning board will review a location for a new restaurant. The planning board does not get bogged down in the minutia of issuing the victualer's license, the liquor license, the blah. The select board does that, and then the state does the rest. So I don't know that you need to spell that
yeah,
out.
it's kind of how
It's redundant here.
like the town of Bethel doesn't inspect
No.
kitchens.
No,
Right, so I think,
no.
it's interesting though.
It is.
Yeah. There's a lot more to that paragraph than I realized.
Do you have to have?
So now the rest,
So it sounds to me like, it looks to me like that was, Mary, thank you for the heavy question there. And that the rest just follows along with making this consistent, these all
Line.
consistent.
Do you need, is a different permit and license from the state if you're gonna be doing, cultivating versus manufacturing versus?
Yeah, they're all a separate license, yeah.
So,
Which makes sense that you guys broke it down.
That's why we broke it down,
That's
it's a
fine,
separate
yeah.
license.
Because in theory, you could not be a grower at all, right? You
Right.
could- In theory, you could buy product and manufacture.
We broke it down too, you know, some majority of residents might say, I don't want a retail store in town, but I'm okay with somebody growing on their own
Right.
property.
Yeah.
So, you know, we didn't wanna wipe the whole business out in one whack,
Right.
too, you know.
Maybe on the state license pieces and the state permit pieces would put
As appropriate,
the appropriate,
just as appropriate.
yeah, or pertaining, appropriately containing license or something.
So you said we're the only town that has it broken out into 4.
Yes.
Yes, it's
So
the only
it's
one
actually
I've ever
five.
found.
The only one we've ever had.
5. Then we get to 5.
We got a new one.
So that means that the voters have
Yes.
choice.
We have a new
They
one.
might like one, but not
Medical
the
just,
others.
if you wanna vote
Caregiver
for 2
retail
and 4, you
store.
can, but you can say no to those.
Right. Did everyone on the ordinance review committee get ordinance number 5, medical marijuana caregiver?
I did not.
We didn't do testing yet, did we?
I thought the state required them all to go now.
You have tested.
No.
They gave you an option in
They
there.
gave it up.
Yep.
Harris did them all together, Freiberg did them all
Yes,
together.
we already had that though,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
and we just
So you
haven't got
haven't done
that
it
yet.
yet.
So if I was going to cultivate and manufacture,
You
I'd
do.
have to follow both ordinances to the
Yeah.
planning board and the state.
Right,
Yeah, why wouldn't you break them?
I don't know.
Okay. I get
Because
it.
we were.
There is some towns out there that have.
I have a
Yeah, that's
suggestion.
good.
There wasn't a lot that had been through them, but there is a lot of towns that have done that.
They copied
I
us.
think he's having fun.
Yeah,
I,
he needs the
He
room.
needs the room.
and I
Do we-
need
can we
sleep
finish?
tonight.
Well, we
Yeah,
have, can we finish 3? Are we done with 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're done with it?
So
Okay.
for homework, for my homework, for everyone's homework, everyone can read The fifth ordinance, the caregiver,
Did you write that one here?
no, I don't know. So the fifth ordinance that I just passed out tonight is the medical marijuana caregiver retail storefront. If you guys would, review that. Review,
Medical caregiver retail storefront ordinance.
review the, and just to summarize for me people, the little map. So we're,
The other, one that's not on here is town boat launches, that's a rec.
that's a question, do you want the boat, then you're moving out into West Bethel, do you want boat launches?
Well, we've already in,
Town.
if you put a
town-
boat launch in there, we've already got a facility there.
Yeah.
At that boat
We're
launch.
talking about recreational.
That's not under the town of Bethel jurisdiction, I don't think, isn't that the Mahoosic Land Trust?
Yeah.
That one is.
Oh,
Yeah,
that one is?
yeah.
This one
This one here.
is under
How about the
town.
one out, further out in Route 2?
This
I'll have
one is
to
the
look.
West Bethel.
I think that
Moran
might
is
be,
Newry. Moran's.
Is that
I think that's Mahoosic Land Trust.
I think that's the land trust.
Which one?
Well, we'll continue working on thinking
park-
of
one at Dave's
recreational
Park is
areas and
ours.
parks and so forth,
Yeah.
but it sounds like we
That's the only
definitely wanted the Bingham Forest and the Mount Will public land included in this,
No.
or no?
Oh,
At
I'm
least
sorry, I was answering her question.
At least the trail. Because if we're gonna do town jurisdiction, at least the trail, but not the sludge dump.
Okay. All right, so we'll continue working on, I will go ahead and on the ordinances that we have seen but have not reviewed, ordinances 4 and 5, I will go ahead and make the same, just standard changes that we are making to all of them to get started. And we will meet again on March 6th.
So we have, the goal is on the selectmen to review all the ordinance before they go to, what's our timeline?
They have to go to public hearing before they can go to the ballot, so
Yeah.
we still have, a couple of site plan ordinance amendments to consider, and we still have plastic bags, so it would be great. Why don't we, on March the 6th,
Can we add something else to that workshop?
Yeah. Yeah, what would you like to?
I don't know, plastic or, that would be like a hotter topic for our community.
My
It's
only
in there.
concern is that you finish, that
We're gonna
maybe
finish
we
these five.
want to finish this and look at the site plan amendments, and then make it publicly known that plastic bags will be on the agenda for, so if it's March 6th, and then the next meeting would be March,
20th.
Do we have the,
dates should be on
no,
there.
the,
As long as the selectmen haven't, they didn't get mad, you have a hearing before the town.
You haven't even
who's
seen
the
it
other
yet.
one?
A couple of site plan amendments.
Those are super easy, we got them before.
But when do they go to
I may have a
the
couple
attorney after the
now that I
select board,
know
right?
what we're doing
So are you,
here.
what are you working on, our deadline, Mary?
Yeah, I was just trying to.
Make sure we get plastic bags in.
Well, everything, not just plastic
Yeah,
bags, but everything.
Yeah.
I just wanted
Do it
to,
all.
Beach.
I think so, because I think Ron's gonna be done with
Part
this
of
at the next
the
meeting,
check
except for some strike throughs.
Town
We've got one, well, two more,
In the town of Bethel.
right?
it just goes, time goes fast sometimes.
I know.
Yes, we really haven't completed one yet.
The meetings that we had years ago.
Yeah, right, you never bought.
Yeah, but I think we're just gonna review the second. So over the next two, we should be about done, I hope. When do we have to have everything done?
Not until April.
Oh, okay, we should be.
Oh, we should be totally fine.
So there's only April, there's 4 meetings.
I don't.